one things they did include, though, was also part of what I call my success in life is being married to the most beautiful woman in the world, who happens to be sitting right here, my wife, Dave.
Oh.
And I'm not just saying that because she's here. Anyway, so Charlotte, when she first came to me and asked me about being the keynote speaker for today, honestly, I was honored, but a little nervous. And then, of course, when I asked her, how much time do I have to speak? And I was told about 20 minutes. At first, I seemed like, wow, that's a lot to talk for 20 minutes. But then I found as I was kind of going through things, I thought, well, of course, I'm part Irish, so we talk a lot. And it could end up being longer than 20 minutes. But I'll try to keep it as brief in there as I can. So, growing up in foster care, I guess back in those times, you got to understand that unlike nowadays, there was a stigma to that. First of all, for me, going even farther back, when I was born in 1973 in Sunnyvale, California, my parents weren't married, and at that point, that was a scandalous thing. It wasn't as common as it is now. So in some ways, it was kind of like I had no chance of having a normal life from the get-go. My father, my biological father, was in and out of jail, went into the Army for a while, went back into jail. He had a history of drug problems. My mom was a hippie, he was kind of a biker. So again, no chance of having a normal life whatsoever. When we moved to Oregon, it was actually after my mother had married my future stepfather. And at that point, this is 1976, it's the bicentennial. Things were going good. I don't know when things turned, but it was roughly around the age of 6 or 7 is when I first had my first real encounter with the system. And I still remember it. And for those of you that are going through foster care right now, this might sound a little familiar. Although nowadays it's very different because of the way the CJC works with forensic interviews and how abuse is investigated. My very first encounter was actually at school. Someone had seen marks on me. My stepfather's favorite way of disciplining me was he called it the rods. I grew up on a farm, and apple trees, if you've ever seen apple trees when they're in bloom, they have these long, thin shoots that come off of the branches. They're made out of wood, they have little nubs on them. He would cut those off about 3 or 4 feet in length, and that's what he'd whip me with. And it wasn't simply, you're learning your lesson, it was all over the place. So someone at school had seen these marks on me, asked me where I got them from. Innocently enough, my daddy spanked me. And again, this might sound familiar to you. I thought that was a norm. I thought that's what every kid got. So my first encounter was being taken to the principal's office and having the principal tell me to drop my pants so they could see the marks. And then I had to sit in the office until a police officer came, and I had to drop my pants again and show the police officer the marks. And then it was an investigator, then it was a social worker. It was humiliating, but that's how the system worked at that time. And I was questioned repeatedly. So tell us what happened. Tell us what happened. That's not what you said last time. Why are you changing your story? And this is how the system worked. And the system didn't work. So what ended up happening for me, at least, was it was in and out all the time. Someone else would see marks. Oh, let's take him out of the home. We're going to put him in this foster home over here for a couple days or for a week. Nope, we'll go put him in a shelter over here for a little while. We'll put him over there. We'll put him with some family. Nope, we're going to take him over here. And there was a lot of bouncing around. Now, luckily, these days, we don't do that. And that's one of the things I'm very honored of being a part of that system now. And as they said in my little bio there, eventually I didn't age out, but in Oregon we have emancipation. And even to get that was not an easy task. I had to prove to the courts and to my caseworker that I could be independent. And the way I had to do that was at 17 years old, I had to have my own place that I lived at, I had to have my own job, while still going to school. How did I do that? Well, I'm going to talk about that now. Well, kind of conducting and putting together what I was going to talk about today, I thought, well, I don't want to talk down to the young people that are here. I've been to events before, keynote speakers, and either they're just so incredibly boring that you just have to leave for a while, go for a walk, try to stay awake, or I've always found, I think when I was younger, it seemed like people were always condescending and talking down. So when I speak to you today, understand this is coming from someone who's been through something. I'm not gonna say I understand what any of you are going through. I've had that before too. I think the worst thing you can say to someone who's going through foster care or a young person who's been through an abusive family situation is, oh, I understand. No, you don't. My experience is nothing like yours. Yours is nothing like mine. I might be able to have an inkling or an empathy, but I can never say that I understand. Growing up in foster care, I think the hardest things, first of all, was there was a stigma. You're a foster kid? What does that mean? What, didn't your parents want you? Don't you have family? And going from where I lived before in a very abusive home that was full of violence, I also went to a school that was a very big, very violent school. The junior high I went to at that time when I was about 13 was the kind of school where you carried a bicycle chain or you carried some kind of weapon with you because it was a tough school. Fights were a daily occurrence, and you had to handle yourself. Next I know, I'm in this little country school that's about a quarter of the size of the school I was at, and everybody's so nice and friendly, and I had learned from from survival, going through foster care and going through what I had to go through, to not trust. So people come, oh, what's your name? Why? What do you want? I had this huge chip on my shoulder. There was also expectations of how I was going to behave. One of the hardest parts I remember in high school was the first time I had a real girlfriend. You know, like that kind of first love thing. Her parents found out that I was a foster kid and that I grew up in an abusive home. And her mother actually said to me one day, you know, I worry about you. I said, why? She said, well, because statistics show that someone who grows up in that kind of home is an abuser themselves. I had to wear that for the longest time. That because something happened to me, I'm in danger of doing it to somebody else. For the longest time, I felt like I had to somehow prove, no, that's not who I am. My identity was an issue too. Who am I now? You know, even when I lived with extended family, I didn't have a mom and dad. When I lived in foster care, that's my foster mom or my auntie. You know, I felt like my last name, Lathrop, should mean something, but I started losing that connection. And that was a big struggle I had for a long time. And speaking of connection, I think one of the struggles I had growing up with foster care, even into my young adulthood, was where's my home? When I was in college, I remember other students talking about, oh, I'm going home for the holidays. I can't wait to go back and sleep in my own bed. What is that? I don't know what that is. I remember when my wife and I first got together, one of the first times she took me to her childhood home. This is the room that I grew up in, and there's photo albums, there's all these cool things and everything. And I know other people that have that stuff too. Oh, these are all the mementos from when I was a child. And I brought with you, share with you personal items. I have two things that over the years I've had with me. They are the only two things, and they mean a lot to me. First up is a belt buckle that my grandpa gave me when I was a kid. This was actually a gift to him from a man that we grew up knowing as Nine Toe. That was his name. He was a Native American war veteran. He'd been in Vietnam, had a toe blown off by a booby trap, so everyone called him Nine Toe. So he was always Uncle Nine Toe. He gave this as a gift to my grandfather, and it was a gift from the heart. My grandfather gave it to me. And I used to wear this. This is Oregon, so you wear stuff like this with jeans and a flannel shirt and a big ugly belt. And I've held on to it to this day. I polish it, I take care of it, because this is one of the few things I have to connect me to my youth. The other, and forgive me if I get a little misty-eyed, because this is something that is very special to me. My kids have seen this. They love it. Every once in a while they'll ask to see Gregory. And this is Gregory. This bear has been with me since I was a year old.
Wow.
Story goes, and actually you can't read the tag anymore, but it actually says 1974. This bear is 40 years old.
Whoa.
Just a year younger than me. When I was a baby, the story goes that my mom, my grandma, took me to Toys R Us in Sunnyvale, California, and where I was born, and took me to the stuffed animal aisle, and there was a wall of everything you can imagine. And they were showing me, you know, Mickey Mouse, and Goofy, all these great things. And at 1 year old, I pointed at this simple little brown bear. Just, it was simple, nothing fancy to him. This This bear has gone with me everywhere I have gone in life. When I was in foster care, this bear went with me. When I went to stay with family, this bear went with me. When I went into the Army, this bear went with me. He didn't come out of the bag, but he was there with me. When I went to college, this bear was with me. This is one of the few things that have to connect me to my childhood. When I hold this, and it's a little musty smelling, I'll be honest, it's about 40 years old, it reminds me of the times when I was scared and I needed something to comfort me. And the reason I say this is because when you're going through the foster care system, it's important to find something, your constant. This is what I call my constant. No matter where I was in life, Gregory was constantly with me. And that's where you find that anchor. Other than that, though, you know, of course, like I said, I don't have a childhood home to go to. I don't have those things. So for me, the idea of home is kind of a vague concept. Hope was a hard thing. I had none. I felt hopeless all the time. What's going to happen to me next? Where am I going to go from here? You know, I'd see other kids I grew up with, they had moms and dads. Oh, they're getting them off to college. They're doing this and that. You know, when it's time for me to want to go to college, I had to fill the paperwork out myself. I had a caseworker, but that was my responsibility. I had to do that. You know, we didn't have the internet back then. That might shock you younger people, but it was a time when there was no such thing as internet or cell phones. So when you went to your school counselor and said, I want to look at financial aid, here's this big book. There you go, good luck. And that's what I had to deal with. But it was me. I had to do it myself. And there were a lot of times where even I'd lay in bed at night and I felt hopeless. And I'll be honest, there were times where I wondered if life was even worth going on with. What was my future? Was I going to ever get married? Was I ever going to have kids? Was I ever going to do anything? Am I just a loser because I'm in foster care system and nobody wants me? That became a part of me. I let that eat into me. Peace, I had none. I was the angriest young man you can imagine. My heart was so full of anger and hate for everything around me. I hated my mom for letting things happen to me. I hated my stepfather for hurting me the way he did. I hated the system for bouncing me around. I hated the judge at that time for bouncing me around and making me feel like I did something wrong. I hated the investigators. I hated everything. I was angry. Luckily, though, my grandfather was there to try to teach me a better way. He pulled me aside one time, I remember, and he said, you know, you gotta get rid of this anger. It's gonna burn you up inside. And me being a smart out teenager, I say, yeah, well, that's what's gonna keep me warm. World's a cold place, Grandpa. He said, no, not that kind of fire. He said, there's a difference between fire, there's a difference between warmth and fire. Warmth is what people have when they have love in their heart, when they care about the people around them. People go to warmth. The kind of fire you got is like a forest fire, like a house fire. People don't go to that, they run from that. And my grandfather told me, if you don't learn to control this anger and let it go, you will have nobody in your life. He's like, I love you, you're my grandson, but you scare me. Now, for me hearing that from my grandfather, this is a man who's a World War II veteran. He was the embodiment of John Wayne. Some of you know who I'm talking about. My grandfather's literally, if you ask anyone who knew him, he looked and acted the same. He was just like John Wayne. He was a big barrel-chested of a man. He was tougher than nails. For him to tell me that I scared him, that hurt, and it frightened me. But the good things about foster care I found is the opposite of those things is, first of all, it was a strength that I developed, and a strength that you as young people have a chance to develop as well. There are things in life that I know I can handle that other people can't handle because I know what I've been through. Going through that system, oh, it was hard. Nothing was in my control. All these grown-ups were making these choices for me. And one of the things that helped me to be strong about was later on in life, when things are out of control, okay, I'm not going to fight against it. Some things that are worth fighting, some things are not worth fighting. But there's a strength that comes with going through this system. And as you get older, you're going to find that strength. Supports. Look around this room right now. I mean, look around right now what you got right here. The adults that are here, this is just a fraction of the support system you kids have. You've got the judge that's on your side. Because remember, decisions that are made, now I didn't realize this back then. As an adult now I realize that. The decisions that are being made are for your benefit. Now there may be times you go, why can't I have a say in it? You can. At least nowadays. Back in those days, you shut your mouth in court, you just did what you were told. You've got caseworkers, you've got service providers, you've got an army to back you up. Literally, an army. You look at our system, how big it is now. And the one goal that they have is to help you succeed in life. To keep you safe. Resiliency. I learned through my experiences of going through the foster care system that sometimes you just simply have to accept things the way that they are. And you have a way of being calm in situations that other people might be freaking out in. I know one thing that's funny is sometimes in my office when things are really getting crazy, even when I have a case that I'm just having a run on, I'm smiling. I've learned to actually thrive on that kind of anxiety, thrive on that energy. The way I look at it is, it's kind of like when you're at the ocean. You know, those waves can be scary, but you get on there and ride one, what a rush. To me, that's what that is. That's the adrenaline rush. And I've had people ask me, how can you be so cheerful? How can you just smile? I mean, everything, this case is blowing up. Because this is nothing. Compared to what I've been through before, this is nothing. I can handle this. Again, you're not alone. You know, I was doing a little bit of research about foster care before today, and what I found was something surprising. I didn't realize this until I was reading some statistics on one of these foster care sites, but there are over 500,000 kids in foster care in our country today. 500,000. And that's from newborns all the way up to 17-year-olds. Think about that. Not everyone goes into foster care. Not everyone gets that chance to go into foster care. But look how big that is. 500,000. You're part of a large group. And what's nice too is nowadays with the internet, I found all kinds of support websites that are out there that are just, there's clubs. We didn't have that when I was like, we had group therapy, which I hated. Basically, it was go in there, listen to someone else complain and whine about what was going on in their life. It's like, yeah, you know what, I got enough problems, thanks, I'm gonna go do something else. But nowadays, that kind of support is there, so you don't have to feel alone. Those times where you think, I'm all by myself in this foster care system. One of the things too that I've developed, I think, through being in foster care is because of having to do things on my own, is I developed a drive and determination that has gotten me a lot of success in life. I may not be a millionaire or a billionaire, but when I set out to do something, I do it. And nothing can stop me. You can ask my wife. There's a stubbornness that I have that's partly genetic, but also I had to learn because I knew if I wanted something to get done, I couldn't just sit on my butt and wait for mommy and daddy to do it for me. I would have to go to my caseworker. When I wanted to get a driver's license at 15 or 16, I had to go see my caseworker, explain to him why I wanted a driver's license, and have him sign off on it. I couldn't just wait for mom or dad to come in and go, hey, you want to get your license? Let's go. When I wanted to get a job, I had to go out and find a job. If I wanted money, I didn't have an allowance. As soon as I was of age to get a work permit, I was out working. At one point, I had my own business. I started mowing the lawns at our church that I went to with my grandparents. And that was just because my grandpa volunteered me for it. Said, he knows how to do it, let him do it. And a lot of our congregation were senior citizens. They started seeing how good the yard and the trees and everything looked. Ooh, who's your yard to do that? Oh, it's a Lakeford boy. He comes down on Saturdays and does it. Well, can you do my yard? Okay. $10 a yard, $5 a hedge, you know, while we, and I started my own business. And one of the things that I learned from my grandfather was, he was not a charitable person. His plan was, he said, okay, I tell you what, first couple jobs you can borrow my lawnmower, my weed whacker, and my hedge trimmers. You can borrow this stuff. After the first 2 jobs, you're renting them until you buy your own. Seems harsh, but it taught me that if you want something, you gotta be able to give something up for it. Eventually, I had my own equipment. I bought a bike. Next you know, here's little Sean Lathrop biking all over the neighborhood with a little trailer behind with a lawnmower and everything like that, and I actually had my own business. At 15. Eventually, I sold everything to another kid and let him go do it, and I made a profit. But what it taught me was, again, if you want something, you got to be willing to go for it, and not let anything tell you that you can't do it. That won't work. One of the things that irritates me the most is when I work someplace and I come up with an idea and say, we tried that, it doesn't work. Well, that's because you tried it. I didn't try it, but I'm going to do it. I remember one of the funniest things I ever heard was from my pastor, the church we've been going to for about 7 years. He said to me one day, you know, one of the things that when I first met you was, the word that came to mind was intense. And I thought that was just a nice way of saying I was an uptight jerk or something. And so what do you mean by that? He goes, you have this focus that I haven't seen a lot of people. Even when you're sitting still, you look like you're focusing on something. He said, and I've seen how you are when you get something in your mind, you laser on it. There's that intensity. And again, that came from my experiences of being in foster care. Because you have to be. You want to get something, you better be focused on it. Mobility. I found that although sometimes it was hard knowing that I didn't have a home base, it gave me a freedom that I've enjoyed. I was kind of a gypsy for a while. I loved traveling around. When I lived in Oregon, there were times where I would just hop on a Greyhound bus. I'll go to Portland, I'll go to Reno, whatever. Why not? I can do that. I feel that freedom. It's also what helped me to be able to come here in 1994 when I decided, you know what, I'm going to college. I'm going to be the first in my family to do it, one way or another. And like my bio said, it's true. I sold everything I owned. I worked 3 jobs. I hardly ever slept. And when I flew out here, I was on a one-way ticket carrying a backpack and a duffel bag. I didn't have a dorm room. I had nowhere to sleep. I slept the first week in a YMCA, and after that in a youth hostel. And the way I got a place to live was I was going to the housing department at HPU every day. I need a dorm room. Well, I don't know if we have anything available. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. It's a focus. And after about 2 weeks of doing that, they finally said, okay, we got a room for you. Just stop coming here. I told them at one point, I said, you know what, I tell you what, how about if I just pitch a tent on your yard because I need someplace to sleep. I can't keep staying at a youth hostel. But it got me in there. So from 1994 till now, I've been here. But if I had been too anchored to home to leave and travel 5,000 miles to come here, it wouldn't have happened. I knew, you know what, I can do this. So the future, what do you have to look forward to? Well, one thing that I've also learned is, well, as chaotic and hectic as it seemed life was while in foster care, I've learned over the years that there is a purpose of everything that I do and everything that happens. Everything is connected in some way. Last year, I did something that honestly, when I was your age, I didn't know I was going to do. I turned 40. Which people that are older than me go, oh, wow, what's the big deal? Keep in mind, when I was a kid, my stepdad said to me at one point, after one of our most vicious fights ever, you're not going to see 18. One of us is getting carried out of this house, and it ain't going to be me. And I took that to be true. One of us is going to kill the other. That's how bad it was. I didn't know I was ever going to see 20. 40? I didn't think that would ever happen. And when I turned 40, I found myself being very introspective, looking back on my life. And I found that everything that happened created something else, another opportunity. Getting put in foster care at the time, I hated it. But that opened up other avenues for me. It's one of the things that helped me to be able to go to college at first, when I first was going to go. It opened up opportunities where now that experience I use in my job today. Leaving the Army lets me go into college. Going to college lets me get into the career path that I have. If I hadn't come to Hawaii, I wouldn't have met my future wife. And I'm going to tell you right now, too, even that, I had a choice when I graduated college. I could have joined the Navy and been an officer, or stay here and get married. And I stayed here and got married. And every job from there led up to something. Everything leads up to something else. And now here I am. How ironic is it? Someone who went through foster care, who had a CPS caseworker, is now a worker and a supervisor at CPS. Don't tell me things don't happen for a reason. Don't try to tell me things aren't connected. One of the things I've also learned is the love that I have for my family. I have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. And I love them more than anything in life. Every day I look at them and I know how blessed I am that the Lord has allowed me to be alive for as long as I have. That despite everything, that the gifts that I've gotten from God is being, I see this, I see my children, and I think, you know, as a father, I know what I don't want to do with my kids because I've been through the wrong parts. I know what pain is like for a child, and I don't want to do that to my own kids. So that love that I have for them, a lot of it, again, I look now at cases where I look and I see how people treat their children, and I wow, can you do that? This is your baby. This is your daughter, your son. But I think it's because a lot of them, maybe either that happened to them when they were younger and they never realized how wrong it was, or nothing like that ever happened to them and they don't realize. But for me, I know as a parent, and I hope that for you as you get older and you have your own families, that you remember what it was like going through foster care. You remember kind of that instability, and you remember and think about that. Go, you know what? I'm going to give my kids something better. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be a better mother. I'm going to be a better spouse. I can do this better. One of the things too, you know, you look at me, and again, I'm not a millionaire or a billionaire or anything like that. I'm not huge successful. But to give you an idea of people who have been in foster care or been through adoption, I want to read to you a list of names here. Think if any of them sound familiar. These are people who either grew up in foster care, spent time in foster care, or adopted out of foster care. Cher, Babe Ruth, Alonzo Mourning, Eric LaSalle, Asai Morales, Eddie Murphy, Ice-T, James Dean, Dante Culpepper, Willie Nelson, Marilyn Monroe, Steve Jobs, John Lennon, Malcolm X, Faith Hill, Francis McDormand, Sarah McLachlan, Ray Liotta, Michael Bay, Nelson Mandela, Dave Thomas, founder of Wendy's, Jamie Foxx, Mike Tyson. All of them. So when you think to yourself, well, do I have any kind of a future? I mean, I'm in foster care. Think how far these other people have gone. Me, I'm just a speck on the radar as far as things go. But what I want to really leave with you folks, with you kids today, is that just because you're in foster care, it is not a hindrance. It is not a weakness. Use this experience to become stronger, more resilient, and be a survivor, not a victim. Too many times we use the word victim. And I tell you right now, I know for me, I hate that term. I'm not a victim. I survived. I survived abuse. I survived being molested. I survived living on the streets. I survived going through the system as fractured as it was at that time. Keeping that mindset is what's going to help you get through this. And as you go into your adulthood, again, telling yourself, I'm a survivor. I'm not a victim. I don't need pity. What I need is understanding, and just give me that little bit of opportunity. And when you see those doors open, burst through. Thank you very much.